Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
It's been a long time.
Yes, you've got much more gray, and I have no hair on my head still.
You didn't have any hair on your head before. What are you talking about?
Nothing's changed on my end.
My son got married, and that was the last time I colored my hair. So it was May of 2023. So I've been joking to him, and I said, "Look what you did to me."
That's right. Well, I love your hair that way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You know, it's been so striking to me is that women, when you start doing this, I mean, it's quite a conversation piece, and everybody says, you know, all the women go, I would never do that. I couldn't do it. It ages you, blah, blah, blah. But the men are coming out of the woodwork saying all these positive things about what it means for them. I've heard things saying, you know, I think it's very like ballsy to do that. And they find that to be a very attractive feature for somebody to not be a conformist to these standards, but to stand in their truth and how I've heard them interpret it. It just is, you couldn't have more opposite of interpretations on it. So I calculated the cost of, if I continue to do this until maybe 80, I'm saving $74,000.
Oh my God.
Can you believe that? It's incredible. If you calculate every 3 weeks until that time, it came to that amount. Yeah.
I can think of a few things to do with $74,000. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm here with Alan, Tom, and Dr. Shawn Horn, who we haven't had on the program since 2022, I believe. How you been, Shawn?
I'm good. Thank you.
I saw on your website, you've released a book since then, ties in some of your faith with, the work that you do. How was the rollout with that? And I don't know how you feeling about the experience of writing it and the response and all that.
It was great. I consider it kind of my training wheels for entering the writing world. And I'm currently signed with New Harbinger Press, where I'm working on a book for adults with ADHD regarding social executive functioning, which is really foundational to social skills. So I'm very excited about this new project. It's going to be released in 2025. So I'm knee deep in the writing process right now. So that the first book really just taught me so much about the whole publishing world and how that works. And so this one I feel a little more prepared for.
Congratulations. My first 3 projects were with New Harbinger. I loved working with those people. It's been a long time, but it's like, I mean, I have nothing but wonderful experiences with those folks.
It has been really great. And yeah, this whole project kind of happened suddenly. I didn't expect it to. I made a video on YouTube that has gone viral with people just pouring their hearts out, saying, oh my goodness, I struggle with this so much. And it was on why do we talk so much, overshare and interrupt? And so individuals with ADHD really struggle. Many will, just wish they contain that or be more effective with their talking habits. And so it just, one thing led to another, and here I am. But I didn't have any idea how big of a topic this was. And so it's been more demanding than my dissertation. I don't think I've worked on anything this hard in my life. So what I'm doing is I'm helping people understand the different states of their nervous system and how that affects their emotions and their behavior. So today, like as we talk about the emotional experience of grief, the nervous system plays a very critical role in that, because what I found is that part of us, I say we have 2 different brains, our feeling brain, our thinking brain, but that feeling brain, which is where the nervous system is ahead of our thinking brain. So we're angry before we even realize we're angry or even, can make sense of it or whatever emotion you want to say. Wow. And so often people will hold themselves responsible and tell these narratives that it's something they think and something about their history and so forth, versus understanding how the wiring works and really leads the way. So our thinking brain can help kind of navigate the feeling brain, but the feeling brain is going to activate in an unconscious automatic way. So it's very freeing.
It's like a reflex, right?
It's a reflex. Yeah. And it's very freeing to learn about that, because then it sheds a whole new light on it. And Deb Dana, who's an author on polyvagal theory, says that once you understand the nervous system, you can no longer see yourself or the world without seeing it through the lens of the nervous system. And that is so true. Recently, I was reading the Big Red Book, and as I was reading it, I just could see it was all talking and addressing people's responses to their nervous system. And so when we identify that, it really stops the shame game, which is what I'm all about, shame busting.
I know you are. Yeah.
What's the Big Red Book?
The one for adult children of alcoholics.
Oh, see, I should know that, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Guess what you're getting for Christmas, Patrick?
No, I was going to say, I have a friend with ADHD, and he was recently diagnosed, and he struggles with some of the things you were describing. So I can think of one person in particular who would really benefit from that book.
Yeah, yeah. And when you know kind of what state you're in, you'll know what you're at risk for. So then you can do some things to help regulate your nervous system. And then when you get it more regulated, you're more emotionally resilient. When you're more resilient, then you can tap into more of that emotional sobriety stuff and really grow yourself into the mature state of navigating your emotions. So
one of the things that's consistent with all your shame busting stuff too in the past. I mean, the bottom line is the more you know, the more you're able to practice self-compassion.
Yeah, it really is. The antidote to shame is self-compassion for sure. And, people get stuck in the why. I call it why procrastination, where they want to know why. Why am I overweight? Why do I keep smoking? And sometimes we just tell them, you just got to do it, and then us have this conversation about the why. But when it comes to understanding how your body works, understanding that why really does make a difference in how we view things. And it also points to what interventions will work for us versus trying things that won't be good fits for your struggle. You'll have a better idea.
Can you give an example of what you just said? How understanding, you see, you're talking about the how, not the why, which I think is important. How is it that I'm reacting this way? Not why am I reacting this way, but what's going on? What is happening, right? How is my body responding to this situation? But when you say understanding that, can it be helpful in terms of intervening? So can you give an example of that where somebody misunderstands it, and then the understanding will then help them be more regulated, so to speak?
Right. Well, the part of our brain that helps to regulate us is that prefrontal cortex. That makes us different than all other animals. That's where what we use for logic and critical thinking and good judgment and impulse control. And when we get activated, something triggers us. We literally flip our lids. I use my hand to demonstrate this, where I make a fist, and in the middle of the fist is my thumb, and that's your feeling brain, your limbic system, and over that is the prefrontal cortex. But when you get activated, it flips and you become a lizard brain. So here you have two people having a conversation, and someone says something and they just get triggered, and they may not know why. It could be that they're triggered by a sound, something they saw, a word that may be related to something in their history that maybe they don't even realize. And so they get activated, flip the lid, and then they say all this stuff and do all this stuff that they regret. And then when they cool off and the lid comes back and it re-engages, then they go, gosh, why did I do that? I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to do that. And then they get really hard on themselves. So with polyvagal theory, they talk about strengthening the what they call the ventral vagus nerve, which is part of that calming aspect of your nervous system. And if we're constantly in a fight and flight activation and have difficulty regulating our emotions, that nerve is weak. It can't overpower the fight and flight. So when you strengthen that, then you're slower at the activation and you're able to down-regulate yourself. So because a lot of people have difficulty down-regulating, they'll turn to their vices, whatever those might be, to self-soothe or to distract. But when you can get ahead of that and strengthen that aspect of your nervous system, then you're going to be able over time to have more resilience, less reactivity, And so that will help in those moments where people end up, being so excited because they're in a great mood that's also part of the fight and flight. We call it e-stress, like a wedding. You're excited about a wedding. You're excited about a job interview, and you go and you're just all energized. And then you say all this stuff. And later you just, oh my goodness, I talked too long. I interrupted. I told them stuff I wish I hadn't, things like that. So that really helps people to kind of build their resiliency by working on ventral vagal activation.
You're changing your brain.
You are, yeah. They say it takes 60 days to change a habit of the brain, and emotions it can become habitual pathways. And so when you practice gratitude, when you practice changing your focus on what is working well, telling a story a different way, if you do that over 60 days, it starts to become more natural. Kind of like anything that you practice, a sport or instrument, it becomes more natural over time.
Right. Right. Thinking, people don't think about it, but thinking is habitual. And we think things over and over and over again why? Because we always have.
Yeah.
Until you change it.
Becomes like body memory. Just like basketball players, you have these automatic responses that help them have excellent performance. And so if let's say someone tends to talk too much and they want to change that, if they practice not talking for 60 days, then when they're in that situation, they're going to have more pause before they share. It's not going to be as difficult for them, but it's going to potentially be very difficult for 60 days to keep their mouth shut, when they're in group situations and just go, oh, I'm not going to say anything. And you're just going to, it's going to kill you. You're going to say, I have to say something, but really work on that. And over time, you're just going to be able to rest into that and feel more relaxed, and it's not going to be hard.
Practice.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love, before we get started on the article, to hear a brief check-in from Alan and Tom. Let's start with Tom.
I was actually washing dishes before I realized it was time to come up here. So actually washing dishes is something I enjoy doing. So as my dad used to say, I have no complaints that would hold up in court.
Well, I wasn't washing dishes. I'm saving them for Tom.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a big stack by the time you get here, Tom.
How's your leg?
Well, my leg is doing better, but it's interesting is that as one issue has subsided, the pain from the fracture actually in my rehabilitation, now my peripheral neuropathy from exposure to Agent Orange has become a real issue. And I saw a neurologist last Friday, and he said, what happened is that the surgery has triggered a real increase in the severity of this peripheral neuropathy. So I was on gabapentin, and he decided that wasn't going to work. So it's not giving me relief. So he put me on Lyrica, and Lyrica did work initially. 70% of what it was.
Oh, you were so excited about Lyrica last week when we talked.
But I'll tell you what happened is it's makes me incredibly sleepy. And I can't tolerate the dose. He wanted me to do 300 milligrams, 100 milligrams a day. And I could only get up to 200, and I fell asleep on 2 patients this last week. Not a good thing when you're a clinical psychologist. Wake up.
Oh, I was thinking that was good. I was thinking you only fell asleep on 2. It's like
that's my biggest nightmare. I just think
that I'm close to and that I have a strong relationship with. Terrible. So Tom, I'm not doing the Lyrica right now. I got a call into him. They do make a 25 milligram and a 50 milligram dose of this. And I'm going to see if I can start a lot less and see if I can avoid the sleepiness, because I am getting some, and which is weird. It's an anticonvulsant. Isn't it weird how they got all these off-label uses for things? And the other one that they're using is Cymbalta, which was started out as an antidepressant. So those are the 3 drugs they've been using for peripheral neuropathy. So right now, I'm hoping that he's going to be willing to start me on 25 milligrams so I can see what that's like.
Alan, I knew someone that in the middle of their session, their therapist died.
Oh my God.
I think we have a winner.
I know. That, can you imagine? Wow.
Well, I need therapy because the first thing I thought was that's hilarious. It's like I need help.
And Tom, to you, work on his vagal nerve, would you? Because it's off. It's I think instead of it soothing him, it tickles him. Is a little clown in there that kind of caused him to be
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for that. I'm sorry.
I know.
But you know what? What a way to go. You know?
The empathy in this podcast is just so, I'm almost in tears.
Hey, humor is just the best medicine
Let's
ever.
talk about grief now, since Tom
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And by the way, that exact scenario is the premise for the Mike Judge, who's Willie Nelson's neighbor, by the way, Mike Judge film Office Space, where the therapist falls asleep after he puts his client into a trance, and then the therapist dies. It's like, yeah, then he's stuck in the trance. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's terrible. Is that a TV show?
It's a movie, Office Space. You must see it. It's one of the most wonderful movies ever made.
Okay, I'm gonna watch it.
It's all about work-life balance. It's timeless.
Yeah, it's about balance.
Yeah. Well, we have an issue of the AA Grapevine. Let me share the screen with you guys. Accepting the Road Ahead by Helen C. from Rockwood, Tennessee. A couple reaches for every tool AA has to find grace, peace, and closure after a cancer diagnosis. Miracles have been happening in my life, and they started happening on October 9th, 1986. That's the day I admitted I was an alcoholic and needed help. I had been confronted about my drinking on the job and was sent home from work. I was told to contact the company's human resources office. They recommended I go into treatment and start attending AA. I did what was suggested and went to my first meeting the next day. Miracle number 1 had just occurred. I didn't drink and went to another meeting the next day. Miracle number 2 is that my sobriety has continued for the past 32 years.
I've grown old in this program while experiencing all the joys and sorrows of life. My most challenging time in sobriety came the day my husband was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Most of us know that this is a death sentence. And being a registered nurse working in surgery, I had an idea of the journey before us. I was filled with fear, denial, and anger. How could this be happening? Our journey began with my husband and I praying together. Dan had 25 years of sobriety and I had 20. We both knew we were powerless and that our higher power was in charge. We needed to follow directions, listen to the information given to us, pray, go to meetings, and talk to our sponsors. We needed to allow each other to process this news at our own pace and in our own way.
My husband was a very private man, and he prayed quietly in silence. I'm a vocal open book. I needed to talk, cry, and plan for the future. We respected each other in our own journeys. We accomplished these goals with humble gratitude for our higher power in our lives in AA. Dan accepted this diagnosis and the fight ahead of him. He did this with quiet dignity and gave himself permission to ask others for help. He continued living life with courage, and his serenity inspired the family to walk with him on this path. We were not a glum lot, as we found joy in each other. We were present for each moment, the good and bad ones, knowing that this too shall pass.
I was so full of fear. I cried all the time. I did most of this when I was away from Dan. My drive to and from work was 45 minutes each way, perfect crying time. Surgery, chemo, and radiation, they were devastating his body. My sweet husband did not complain and asked very little of me. Words cannot describe the pain I felt watching my loved one die. I know God carried each of us just as described in the poem Footprints in the Sand. Dan and I did not drink, and we were doing the best we could each day, but I was sure I would not survive without him. Dan was my best friend, confidant, and lover. He took care of everything, such as the bills and the finances. One day, I asked him who is going to hold my hand? His reply, squeeze your hands, and I will have one, and God will have the other. I continued to do this 12 years later, and it always makes me feel like a child between parents holding me as they swing me.
All my self-centered feelings were brought front and center. I wanted to die with Dan. I did not want to be left behind. I prayed daily to die and received the same answer, no. One day I was out walking, asking once again to die and getting the same answer, so I screamed, all right, I'll live, but I'm not happy about it. Acceptance is not always pretty or gentle, but it's the only way I know to peace and serenity. Now that that was settled, I could give love, support, and encouragement, and yes, even joy to Dan, our family, and friends. The program guided us through admitting our powerlessness, gaining a measure of sanity through our higher powers, literally turning our lives and wills over. Both of us continued to do inventories and promptly acknowledged our wrongs, and we became closer to God, even when we did not understand our journey. We were given a spiritual awareness as a result of the steps, enabling us to help other alcoholics.
Dan continued to go to AA meetings as long as he could. His friends brought meetings to our home when he could no longer go to meetings. We comforted our children and friends, and Dan told me he would be waiting for me. If we can believe in beautiful deaths, his death certainly qualifies. It was physically difficult, but spiritually beautiful. My husband died 18 months after his diagnosis. We both tried to live each day to its fullest. We treasured our time and thanked God for giving it to us. Today, I'm alive and well. I'm grateful my higher power did not grant my request to die. I have wonderful friends in the rooms of AA. I'm able to be a grown-up with responsibilities, pay bills, take care of problems. I've been given the gift of watching our grandchildren grow into wonderful young adults. I can share memories of Grandpa because I'm sober and alive.
My journey is not unique, but it's mine. I do not know the end of my story, but I know I won't be alone and God will take care of me. I see the miracles that have occurred, and I know they'll continue to occur in my life as long as I am sober.
I'll just get this out of the way. My dad was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer. And the more real it becomes, the more difficult it's going to be to, deal with the grief. But I mean, with my connection to, the Emotional Sobriety Fellowship and the work I do in the podcast and your experience, Tom, because I think that by now I've had examples of cases that have gone very well or gone, optimally or somewhere around there, and cases that have not. And I don't need to get too doomer about it, and I know that grief is not something to be afraid of necessarily. It's part of the sauce. So that's what came up for me. But I thought it was a great article. Let's go around and chop it up.
No, I just want to add to that. Grief. I always say grief is the hardest part of love. But we grieve because we love. That's a good thing.
Yeah. My grandparents were married for 60 years. And when my grandpa was passing away, my grandma was very grief-stricken, as you can imagine. And he looked at her, she went by a nickname, Scoots. And he said, Scoots, don't worry. We'll be together. We're just taking a break. We'll be together soon. And I loved that concept of just taking a break, that it's just a short time, but that I always think of that when I want to comfort myself with the idea of someone I love passing away, that I say that. And yeah, I'm sorry, Patrick, to hear that about your dad.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine that, I think it's been like a week or something like that, maybe like a week and a couple of days. And it's just, I didn't have any immediate grief sense because it felt like, I don't know, it felt so disembodied from him and all the way that I've known him my whole life. And, I've been very fortunate that he's been in my life. And, the more that I think about how that paradigm is going to shift so much, or that I could lose him, it's just crazy, but, I can, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, it's recovery is like it's like a training for when important things happen, because you're already you're in touch with your emotions. You're not numbing them. You're leaning on other people. You're involved with kind of the maintenance of your mental health. And I'm just going to need to step up my maintenance, for something like this.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you we take advantage of that, it's a gift that brings us into the present moment. It's like reminds us that, we're not here forever. And, what Shawn's talking about with taking a break, it's like, I was reading this morning, a thing about the philosopher Seneca literally called on the shortness of life, and just about, how very brief our lives are anyway. And it's just perspective is everything. Yeah.
It's interesting as I sit here with you guys and hear this, because first of all, just aware of how for each of us, our first response is to associate to what it means to us personally.
Mm-hmm.
See that? It just happens automatically. See, that's just how we are. We're wired as human beings to see, how do I relate? What does it mean in terms of my life? And I appreciate you sharing, Patrick, what that means to you right now. And each of us have experienced loss in this room, and some of us future loss coming. It's always going to be a part of this human experience. I thought of my dad immediately when he was dying. And, some of the things that stand out in terms of the way that this couple was able to claim the experience that they were having, instead of letting the diagnosis of cancer claim them. And I've seen that so many times, is that people get claimed by the experience they're having, and they don't know how to claim that experience and be able to be in relationship in a way that's going to help them become more than they are. See, that's the incredible opportunity with every event in our life. We have an opportunity to further our development and growth, and our spiritual development, our emotional development, our psychological development, any way you want to think about it. But all of these provide incredible opportunities. I just wanted to unpack what they did a little bit, in terms of there were so many wonderful things that they did as they met this issue. First of all, they kept connected during the trouble. You guys will hear me say this all the time, is that when there's trouble, add more self. And that's what you have to do. And that they were able to do that. The tendency is to really subtract yourself from those situations, because you don't want to feel the pain. If we avoid it, we're not going to grow from it. The bottom line is that the grief response is a very important part of our ability to take an experience and integrate it, because the first response to loss, and she said it, is she lost a sense of herself. When you lose someone that's so important to you, you lose yourself for a period of time. And she was now talking about it. Oh my God, what am I going to do when you're gone? I don't know who I am, what I'm going to do, and that is a very, very normal response. It does not mean that she was overly dependent on him. So I don't want to pathologize that response. That's a very common response to loss. That's significant loss of this kind of nature. And there's a period of time where when you go through a loss, that you're really searching for yourself and what it means. Now she was able to discover parts of herself that she didn't know about before, her ability to pay her bills and to take care of things. And she discovered that, my God, that there's still these relationships that are so important that are going to continue on in a different way. But, it's wonderful that what they did is she remained connected to him with the image he left her about, if you're struggling, hold your hands, and on one side God's hand will be, on the other side my hand will be, and your hands will be in the middle. In psychology, we call it creating a transitional object. It's such an important thing to be able to get a hold of something like that allows you to soothe yourself during a situation, to find some comfort in a very, very painful situation and some deep meaning to it. See, so he continued to be a part of her life, even though he wasn't present. He was spiritually and psychologically and emotionally quite present in her life. And still is, I'm sure, in terms of what we hear. So that stood out to me in terms of this. Having a faith, Freud said it in a critical way, but there's also a really positive way to look at it. He says, religion is the opiate for the masses. That's what he said, right? But what an opiate does is when you're in pain, it really soothes you and helps you deal with the pain incredibly. And so while he may have been somewhat denigrating and derisive of religion, there's an incredible value of having some kind of a belief and understanding that helps you make sense of something that is senseless. It really, and I have that. It's not connected to a religion, but, I believe that there's a force in our lives that if we pay attention to it can move us in ways. You can call it God. I'm fine with that, whatever you want to label it as, but I look at you, watch a child being born, there's some power greater than yourself going on here. I mean, that as a mom, Shawn, when that your baby's coming through you to the world. I mean, that's like a miracle how that happens. But other things too that we've all seen and witnessed, and we see that magic take place in the rooms all the time.
Sure.
There were so many things that they were able to do. They reached out to the community, staying connected to their community. It's so easy to isolate and pull in when we're hurt and withdraw and not let somebody else be there for us and to see our pain. Like the idea is somehow, it's back to the shame thing, is that somehow I should be able to handle this and not cry. I mean, all these should demands that we put on ourselves are so ridiculous and interfere with a real natural therapeutic response to the incredibly challenging situation in life. So I love the hope that this couple is giving us in terms of how they met this devastating situation in their life and found a way through that kept their integrity and dignity and connection intact.
Uh-huh.
Really inspiring.
I think religion becomes an opiate when we have the demand for emotional freedom. And I read a book on emotional sobriety and religion, and the author said that many people turn to religion like they turn to alcohol for that emotional escape. But when we can not have that demand, but use it as a strength to embrace all emotions as they are, then it is not approaching it to be an opiate, but it's approaching it for a deeper grounding.
I think, and that's how we talk
Sobriety.
that we talk about it as emotional freedom, but it means free to deal with what's going on with your emotions. See, it's engaging in that in a way that ends up being highly valuable and productive in a person's development, and on that path to developing real maturity and balance.
Yeah, I like in this article, she mentioned both a positive emotion of joy, and then she also addressed grief and despair, really not wanting to live. And so it didn't give this idea that you get this strength and you have all this joy, but you experience all emotions and that's acceptable. And many people get this idea that it's wrong to not grieve or be sad or want to die, that they're doing something wrong if they feel that way. But it's natural, it's normal, and it's their emotions aren't right or wrong. That's what I say.
Mm-hmm.
Saying I don't want to live is a way of living, or it's a way of holding on to life. You know what I mean? It's you bring that into the light, and you're kind of negotiating with it.
Oh, it talk about these things, a lot of times you have to name it to tame it. I mean, you got to be able to identify what you're experiencing, and then you've got a sense that you can start to struggle with it. I'm reading Rollo May's book called The Discovery of Being. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, May was an unbelievable genius. He really brought existential analysis to the United States in a way that nobody before him had brought it. He was an existential therapist. And, what he talks about is so convincing is that the real cause of our anxiety is our fear of non-being. And you can really look at all of these issues that trigger anxiety, like for her. She was afraid when she lost him that she would lose herself, that she wouldn't be able to be anymore in this world. That's a big, big, big fear underneath everything for all of us. And, that's the other thing that starts to happen with this is that we start to be able to face something like that in a different way and not have to run away from it. Because that's what existential analysis is really about, is helping people deal with the givens of being human. And, one of the givens is that we're all finite.
You mentioned childbirth, and one of the things that happens in childbirth is you get to a place where the labor contractions are so intense it feels unbearable. And they say right when you get to the point where it feels unbearable, that's the sign that you're turning the corner and the baby's coming. And so it's a good sign. And I think that grief can feel unbearable and people can think, I can't overcome this. But actually, when you breathe into it and you move through it, you are birthing a new you.
Change your life, change your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you